I, 28M, recently discovered that my wife, 28F, was having an affair with her former boss, 35M, who, by the way, is also married with kids. We've been married for 5 years and we're high school sweethearts. We were each other's first everything. We even lived next door to each other as kids. She's always been a constant in my life. Both of us came from troubled backgrounds, but we leaned on each other and built something better than what we had seen growing up. Or at least, that's what I thought. Maybe I was just fooling myself the entire time. I still work remotely, while she's gone back to the office. There aren't many women in her field, and she used to complain about how her job felt like a boys' club. Her assistant principal, who was also her supervisor at the time, was supposedly one of the good guys who looked out for her. She recently got a promotion, which made me really happy for her. She'd become a supervisor herself. This promotion came with new responsibilities, including a few business trips each year. Her first trip was last week, from Wednesday to Friday. Before she left, I told her I'd be cheering her on from home, and she said she'd leave her heart with me and asked me to take care of it. It's a phrase she always uses when we're apart. On Monday, she came home early from work, and I could immediately tell something was wrong. She seemed overwhelmed, and there was a red mark on her right cheek. She's so pale that she bruises easily. I asked her what had happened, but she just asked me for a hug, saying she needed my comfort. After hugging her, she sat me down on the couch and dropped the bombshell that completely shattered my world. She had sex with her former boss during the team lead trip. At first, I couldn't even process it. It felt like I was watching someone else's nightmare unfold, or like she was about to say it was all a sick joke. I think I would have preferred the cruel joke to this reality. I stayed silent throughout her entire confession, unable to utter a word. I was in total shock. Cheating hits close to home for me, as it does for many people. My family fell apart because of an affair my dad had. I caught him cheating and told my mom. My relationship with my dad has been strained ever since because he blames me for ruining the family and has never forgiven me. My wife knew what cheating did to my family and how it devastated me. She's seen me cry over this issue since our teenage years and comforted me. And now she's done this to me? To us? Apparently, the boss's wife found out and confronted them both at work. It turned into a huge scene with employees and customers witnessing everything. The woman called my wife white trash and slapped her. After the slap, other employees intervened and she was escorted out. My wife then called her older sister 30F. According to my wife, her sister scolded her and insisted she needed to confess the affair to me directly. I still didn't say anything, and she pleaded with me to respond. The only thing I could manage to ask was for details about what happened on the trip. She said that on the second day, she went out for drinks with the other team leads, and they stayed out late for team bonding. As the night went on, each team lead left until it was just her and her former boss. They ended up back in his room listening to music. He kept complimenting her, saying that if he were me, he wouldn't be able to keep his hands off her. Eventually, he kissed her. My wife told me she didn't know what got into her, that she wasn't thinking straight. But she let him continue kissing her, which escalated to groping and eventually, sex. I couldn't handle any more details and got up from the couch, telling her to stop. When she reached out to hold my hand, I pulled away and told her not to touch me. She broke down in tears, apologizing over and over, begging for forgiveness, saying it was the biggest mistake of her life, that she hated herself and wished she could undo it all. She kept insisting how much she loves me and only me, claiming that alcohol had clouded her judgment. I told her she needed to leave. She should call her sister to come pick her up. She got up, crying even harder, and tried to hug me, but I pulled away again. She begged me not to do this, promising to quit her job, give me full access to her phone, and go to counseling. I couldn't hold it together. I told her if she wasn't going to leave, then I would. I didn't even stop to pack a bag, just headed for the door. She grabbed my arm, trying to stop me, and kept pleading, saying that after everything we've been through, this couldn't be the end for us. Even though I was heartbroken seeing her in such despair, leaving her while she cried was gut-wrenching because I love her deeply. I love her more than I thought possible, but she shattered me. She destroyed everything we had and our future together. I ended up at my mom's house, where I'm currently staying. I don't know how I managed to drive there, but when I arrived, I just broke down. I don't think my mom has ever seen me cry as a teenager or an adult. The only person who has ever seen me cry is my wife. I told my mom what happened because there was no way to hide it with me showing up like that. She was heartbroken, as she and my wife had always gotten along well. My mom treated her like a daughter, and their relationship was close. She didn't judge me, but she offered to let me stay as long as I needed and tried to comfort me. Since I left, my wife has been bombarding me with calls and texts, but I haven't replied. Her messages are full of desperate pleas for me to come home, to talk with her, and to not give up on us. I feel utterly shattered. I thought I knew what this kind of pain was, but experiencing it firsthand is something else entirely. I never imagined my wife could do something like this. I always believed that cheating was a deal breaker for me, that the relationship would be over. Yet now, I'm wondering if I should give our relationship another chance. Go to counseling together and try to salvage it. I keep thinking about our shared history, how much I love her, how we seem like perfect matches, and how she was always there for me when I felt alone. I'm lost and don't know what to do. This week has been agonizing, leaving me feeling like a helpless kid again, watching everything around me crumble. And I'm facing this without my wife, who's always been my best friend and rock. I was convinced I didn't have the full story. So yesterday, I decided to reach out to the other betrayed spouse OBS. I needed her perspective to gain some clarity. She wouldn't have any reason to lie or hold back. I found her on Facebook and sent her a message on Messenger. She responded within 10 minutes and offered to video call right away. I immediately agreed. As soon as I saw her face, I could tell she was going through the same kind of hell. She said that after being escorted out of their workplace last Monday, she had tried to contact me but couldn't find my details. In fact, one of the last things she said to my wife was a threat that she was going to tell me everything. Hearing this, I couldn't help but recall how my wife had rushed home that day and how her sister had insisted I needed to hear the truth from her. I asked OBS if she knew more about what happened during the team lead trip, or if it was just a one-night stand, and how she found out. What she shared confirmed my worst fears. The affair started before the trip and was documented with emotionally intense texts. OBS shared everything with me via screen share, and I barely held it together. She told me that back in January, she noticed her husband becoming withdrawn and disinterested. She had seen him texting my wife, but he brushed it off as work-related. The day before the trip, she dropped by his office to bring something he'd forgotten, and found him with my wife, standing close, joking and smiling. The atmosphere was undeniably flirty. When they saw her, they quickly separated, and my wife's face looked panicked while her husband brushed it off. That's when she became certain something was going on but wanted undeniable proof before confronting him. After the trip, her husband was even more distant. That night, she waited until he fell asleep and checked his phone. She found their text thread where everything was laid out. Intimate messages back and forth before the trip. It had started as emotional cheating, with him saying he couldn't focus at work whenever my wife was around. It was clear from the text that her husband was the pursuer, but my wife never shut him down. Some texts had him bashing his wife, even mentioning repeated miscarriages in a disgusting manner while saying he needed a woman like my wife. There were also texts from Thursday night inviting my wife to join the team for drinks and messages the next morning, making it obvious they had slept together. After Thursday night, there were no more replies from my wife. I didn't think it was possible to feel more pain, but I was wrong. OBS told me that she managed to stay calm because she didn't want to wake her twins in the next room. She didn't wake her husband or confront him immediately. In her heart, she was done with him. She felt more anger than she ever had during their marriage and was set on humiliating him like he had humiliated her. She faked smiles and acted like everything was fine until Monday, when she planned to expose him at work in front of everyone. The confrontation had been brewing for a while, and it was only a coincidence that my wife was at work that day. When OBS saw my wife with her husband and another employee, she decided to target my wife too. My wife tried unsuccessfully to quiet her down. OBS then mentioned her husband showed no remorse, only anger at her public outburst. She also said he was fired the next day and that she kicked him out. One of the hardest things for her was explaining everything to her twins, and I understood because I saw my mom go through the same thing after my dad's affair. She said this ordeal showed her who her husband really was. While he pursued my wife was still a willing participant, and she had no sympathy or respect for her. I told her I couldn't blame her for that, and that she had every right to feel that way. She actually apologized to me for her husband's role in the affair, which left me speechless. I apologized for my wife's part, and she said we were now part of a club neither of us wanted to join, a club our spouses forced us into. She asked about my situation with my wife, and I told her I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I wasn't staying with her. We wished each other the best and exchanged numbers in case we needed to talk again. Every raw emotion I had was only heightened. I confided in my mom about what I learned, and although she didn't voice any judgment, I could tell she was upset with my wife. Part of me felt a twisted satisfaction that her husband was losing everything, his job and his family, and that maybe he was suffering too. But I felt guilty for that because a wife was losing her husband, and children were losing their family. Those kids are in for a world of pain. I also felt anger towards my wife for breaking our vows, for putting my health at risk. We had sex after she returned from the trip, and the texts hinted they didn't use protection. I know I need to talk to my wife about what OBS revealed and demand a full timeline. But I feel more lost than ever. It's like I'm drowning. 1 week since D-Day. Talking with OBS has left me reeling. I haven't been sleeping well, and the betrayal feels like an open wound. My wife, who I've known since we were 5 years old and started dating at 13, my best friend and confidant, had an affair. I feel like a hollow shell. When I go outside, I imagine everyone knows and is secretly laughing at me. Has anyone else experienced that? I decided to break no contact NC to request a timeline. I planned to go on Sunday without warning. Honestly, I wanted to give her another chance to be truthful and see how she'd been living. Some suggested AP could be at our home. It was painful to consider that she might be defiling the home we shared for most of our adult lives. But after everything, it wasn't far-fetched. I texted OBS for a description of AP's car and explained why I needed it. She sent the info. I drove back and looked out for AP's car but didn't see it. Inside the house, I found my wife WW alone on the couch. She was stunned to see me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. I hated seeing her like that and felt an urge to comfort her. But then I remembered why we were here in the first place. It was confusing to hold back. WW seemed relieved when she saw me. She had clearly been crying. She moved toward me, but I asked her to stop. She said she had been worried about me and thanked me for coming back. I asked if AP had been in the house. She said no. I searched the house while she followed, assuring me that he had never been there. I didn't find anything to suggest otherwise. I asked if she had any contact with him. She admitted he left a voicemail, but she didn't call back and blocked his number. She showed me proof. We sat at the dining room table to talk. I tried not to let my emotions take over. I told her I wanted answers. She agreed and said she was glad we were talking again. I asked if she had quit her job. She said she hadn't yet, but was suspended for a week pending an investigation the same day AP was fired. She would learn the outcome tomorrow. She said AP's firing was the only reason she hadn't quit as she offered. I asked her to tell me about the affair. She said she already did, but I told her we both knew there was more to the story, and now I'm giving her another chance to be honest. If I discovered any lies, there would be no going back. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. She revealed the extent of the affair, which matched what OBS showed me. It started emotionally with some flirting at work, but they only had sex once. She didn't go into every detail that OBS showed, but did reveal the emotional affair. Hearing her confirm it felt like a fresh wound. I was silent again, like on D-Day. She asked what I was thinking. I asked why she did this. She knew my family's history firsthand, but still did this. Was she unhappy? She broke down crying, saying she had never been unhappy with me or our marriage. She loves me, and our relationship is the most important thing to her. I said her actions spoke louder. She said she didn't know why she got involved in the affair, but never wanted to hurt me, and it kills her. By the time they had sex, she had made so many mistakes and realized she was in too deep and didn't know how to pull herself out, especially with AP championing her at work. She said the affair was no failure on my part, it's all on her. I asked if she felt forced by AP. She said everyone loved him, and there was a boys' club mentality. She said she froze during sex and kept saying sorry, wishing she could take it all back. My emotions were slipping, so I tried to speed it along and asked why she had sex with me afterward, which she initiated. She said she felt so disgusting and guilty that she wanted to wash it away by being with me. I told her she didn't wash anything away. All she did was endanger me to ease her conscience. She didn't respond, just kept crying. I asked if she ever planned to tell me. She said she wanted to confess but was afraid because she knew cheating was a deal breaker for me. She thought she could fix it by stopping the affair and not communicating with AP outside of work. She said she stopped texting him after they had sex. I asked if AP wore a condom, and she said sex wasn't planned, and she didn't mention it to AP because she froze. She said she'll never forgive herself, and I have every right to hate her. Seeing the pain she caused and being without me with NC has terrified her. She pleaded for another chance for our marriage. I compared her to my dad, which hurt her deeply. She said she was nothing like him, but I asked where the difference was. She tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. She said we're not my parents, and it's different for us. She asked if we could make it through this after everything we've been through. I couldn't say that. I requested a timeline. She seemed terrified, but I insisted, and she agreed. I told her we needed to get tested. She agreed without issue. I was barely holding my emotions together, so I went to pack a bag and essentials. She begged me to stay, saying she'd sleep on the couch but wanted me home. I said I couldn't stay with her. When I was leaving, she said she loves me and is sorry for everything. I didn't respond. I couldn't. She asked where I was staying, and I admitted I was with my mom. She asked if I could tell my mom something, but I said I can't be her go-between. I know she's worried about her relationship with my mom. She treated her like a daughter since WW never really had her mom in her life due to neglect. She asked if she could hug me, but I said no and left. Now, I'm looking at my options. She told more of the truth this time, but reality is still reality. I don't know what to make of her statement that she froze during sex. I also don't know if I'm ready to tell others about the affair because I feel so embarrassed. For now, I'm just trying to take it day by day. I've been keeping light contact with my WW. She texted me that she was going in for her post-suspension meeting, and an hour later, she informed me she was fired. We discussed getting tested for STDs and scheduled our appointments for Thursday. Last night, she FaceTimed me. I was hesitant to answer, but I did. She looked the same as she did on Sunday, tired and sad. She told me she had finished the timeline, and I told her I'd come over tomorrow to get it. She said writing the timeline was one of the hardest things she's done, second only to our current separation. She was trying not to cry. Normally, I'd comfort her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. My mom offered to come with me for support. She said she wouldn't go into the house but would wait in the car, worried about my ability to drive back. I accepted her offer. When we arrived, my WW was waiting with a 2-page document. She looked anxious. I sat beside her on the couch and it felt like D-Day all over again. I wanted her to read the timeline aloud. She was taken aback by this request. The fear was clear on her face. Her fear heightened my own dread. I told her I needed her to do this for me, and after a moment, she complied. Hearing the timeline was devastating. It covered everything from her being hired to D-Day, how her friendship with AP began, the culture at work, how AP presented himself as different. While he joked with the guys, he didn't partake in the nonsense and kept his department intact. He went out of his way to get her recognized, and they established a friendship. AP started venting about his home life, and she listened. He asked about hers and seemed to probe. She told him about her mom relapsing. AP grew bolder in his venting. She now wishes she'd spoken up, but at the time she was blinded by her view of him as one of the good ones. At work, coworkers teased her about being AP's favorite. She didn't confide in me because I was dealing with issues with my dad, and she felt her problems were petty in comparison. She vented to AP instead, starting the emotional affair. AP began flirting with her at work and through texts, and she reciprocated. He told her a promotion was coming up and that she was a top contender. After the promotion, he hugged her, joking that she could thank him later. During a team outing, they broke off to their own table, and he vented about OBS and his kids. They went to his room under the pretense of listening to music to celebrate her promotion. He turned on music, talked about the view, then pulled her to him and started dancing. He kept saying how sexy she was, and that if he were me, he wouldn't be able to keep his hands off her. He eventually kissed her, and she froze, her mind shut down. AP groped her, and it led to sex. She didn't orgasm, and he finished quickly. He told her, "That was a hell of a celebration," then fell asleep. She quietly left, showered repeatedly, but still felt filthy. She didn't sleep that night and cried thinking of me. The next morning, she skipped the meeting. AP called, disappointed he missed a morning round. She barely replied, lying that she was hungover. He covered for her at the meeting and suggested staying an extra day. She was afraid to tell me because she knew cheating was a deal breaker. She planned to end the affair by limiting communication with AP to work. She came home early, wrecked with guilt, but acted like nothing was wrong. On Saturday morning, she initiated sex with me in an attempt to wash away what she did, but felt worse because AP hadn't used a condom. On Monday, AP tried to talk, and she told him the affair was a mistake, but he refuted until interrupted by a coworker. She called her sister in a panic. My Sil found out the same day I did. There's more to the timeline, but that's the gist. While reading, she cried, taking breaks to catch her breath. I wasn't holding up much better. She touched my hand as she apologized repeatedly, but I pulled away. I had to get out of there. I took the timeline and left. In the car, I broke down, and my mom embraced me without saying a word. I cried in her arms like a child. I was in no condition to drive, so she drove us back. My WW kept calling and texting, even blowing up my mom's phone, but I told my mom I would handle it. I eventually called back. She asked if I was okay, but I told her I wasn't. She apologized and admitted I was right. She was no better than my dad. She said writing the timeline was like confronting herself. It gave her clarity. She insisted she loves me and has only ever loved me. Before we were together, we were friends who became best friends, and she treasures every moment with me. She hates herself for her choices and knows her suffering doesn't compare to mine or OBS's. She said nothing. She's lost means anything compared to losing me. She asked if I could find it within me to reconcile, promising to spend forever trying to show me what our relationship means to her and doing the work to make things right again. I couldn't respond. My hand was shaking. I only said I needed some space. Do I regret hearing the timeline? No, because I needed to know. Decisions can be hard for me, but once I make one, I stick to it. I've always loved my WW. We've been through so much, and I don't want to lose our relationship, but I'm broken by what's happened. I do think individual counseling IC would help. I did IC for a year after my dad's affair. I also still want to go the polygraph route and have my WW take a pregnancy test, even though she's on birth control. Since my WW read her timeline, it hasn't left my mind for a moment. I haven't slept well, constantly reading and rereading it, experiencing a mix of sadness, hurt, anger, and embarrassment. Sometimes I can't even articulate how I feel. I don't think she was lying or embellishing. Everything matches what OBS showed me. The timeline was impactful for her. Though the affair remains unforgivable, I do believe AP preyed on her. I'm angry I didn't see it and failed to protect her. When we were 17, after a bad incident with her mom, she came to my house and I held her, promising to always protect her. I feel like I failed with AP, taking her word without seeing his motives. On Friday night, I texted OBS to see if we could talk. She called after putting her kids to bed, saying it's been rough on them, and she's trying to focus on them. She said it's going to be a bitter divorce. AP is acting like the wronged party, puffed up with himself, and hasn't apologized. He's living at an extended stay, and she changed the locks so he couldn't come and go. I asked about AP's history of cheating or abusing power. She suspected past infidelities, but never had proof he couldn't deny. She believes he got overconfident and sloppy with my WW. There was an allegation 5 years ago at AP's previous job. A coworker reported him to HR for retaliation after she refused an advance, but nothing came of it. She was dismissed as a difficult employee who was frequently late and bitter after AP wrote her up. OBS ignored the warning signs because she was pregnant. With no further allegations and a great reputation, she trusted him. I asked if AP gave her a timeline. She said she didn't care for one, just wanting a divorce. She asked if I'd made a decision about my WW, and I told her I hadn't. She suggested her attorney for a consultation when I was ready. We talked about life post-D-Day before hanging up. I felt more anger toward AP, believing he set his sights on my WW, but she still engaged in the EA, and I felt deeply hurt, lost, and betrayed. I hate all of this. Yesterday I couldn't get what OBS said off my mind. My Sil called and her tone was troubling. She was worried about my WW, thinking she wasn't doing well and hadn't been eating. She asked if I had talked to her, but I hadn't since Thursday. My WW has been respecting my request for space. Hearing this troubled me. I hated the idea of her suffering, and each day without contact has been extremely hard for me. My CIL asked if I could talk to her, but I had already decided to visit. I stopped at a local restaurant my WW loves and ordered her usual meal. I went straight to our home without warning. Part of me wondered if I'd find AP there, but his car wasn't around. My WW was lying on the couch, the TV on, but unwatched. She looked like she was going through hell. Conflicting emotions hit me. Some of her choices brought this on, but I also wanted to comfort her. She sat up, surprised to see me, and moved to get up, perhaps to hug me, but stopped herself. I showed her the food and told her I needed her to eat. She was caught off guard, saying I didn't have to, but I insisted. I helped her settle at the table, got her something to drink, and she started eating. I asked if she'd heard from AP or if he'd been to the house. She said no and handed me her phone without hesitation. While she ate, I searched her phone. There were no new conversations with AP, and his number was still blocked. After she finished eating, I mentioned her sister's call, which threw her off. She promised she didn't ask her sister to call and was trying to respect my space. I told her it was okay, and I wasn't bothered by the call. She said I shouldn't have to rush home to take care of her, but I said our vows still matter to me. She started tearing up, saying she ruined us and me, that our relationship was the best part of her life. She said she's angry and disappointed in herself for betraying me in the worst way. Her words hit me deeply, and I broke down. She kept saying she didn't deserve me and that I must regret being with her. For the first time since D-Day, I cut in and said that my life has been wrecked, but I don't regret her. I listed the time she saved me, reminding her of our first meeting at the playground at 5, and at 13 when I confessed my feelings, and she held my hand. I told her that even then, I knew I wanted to be by her side. I reminded her of when I proposed, and she said yes. I never wanted to part from her, and that never changed before D-Day. We cried without saying another word. I gathered myself and told her I needed to go. As I was leaving, she thanked me for coming and said she understands my need for space, accepting whatever consequences come her way. She's not giving up on us and is looking into IC. I only nodded. I have my first IC session scheduled for Monday, but I feel nowhere closer to knowing how to proceed, nor do I feel any less lost. Every emotion imaginable is wrecking me, and I feel trapped in a maze. I woke up feeling less heightened, with my mom's dog by my bedside. The dog has been a comforting presence, especially during our walks. It's strange. Just a few months before D-Day, my WW and I were discussing getting a dog of our own. I planned to take the day slow, and work was going relatively okay. During my lunch break, I went to grab a snack when suddenly, a trigger hit me out of nowhere. It felt like I was being pulled apart like cotton candy, and I was hunched over the kitchen counter, trying to catch my breath. I believe I was having a panic attack, one of the worst triggers I've experienced. My mom's dog was alerted by my distress. This episode lasted for about 5 to 10 minutes. My mom was out on a grocery run, and not wanting to be alone, I called my WW. My breathing was still hitching when I did. She answered on the second ring and could immediately hear the distress in my voice, responding with urgency. When I didn't respond right away, she switched to a FaceTime video call. Whatever she saw in my face seemed to shake her. I asked if she could just stay on the call for a bit, and she nodded. It took me a couple of minutes to settle down. My WW asked again what was wrong. I knew I had to tell her. There was no way around it after what she had just seen. I explained that I've been getting mind movies of her and AP in the hotel room, and that certain things have become triggers for me. She listened without saying a word, taking it all in. I told her that this particular trigger was strong, and that I felt like I was having trouble breathing, only getting a few hours of sleep, and feeling like a shell. I admitted I hadn't told her any of this before because I felt like I'd lost her, and didn't know how to approach her with broken trust. I felt like I was grieving the loss of her, my best friend and family. She started crying and said she was so sorry for doing this to me. We cried together for a bit. After we settled down, she shared that she's been speaking with her therapist about feeling the same losses and emptiness I described, but she feels it's different because she imploded our relationship and family. She wants to fight for our relationship and doesn't want to be without me, but also wants to respect my space. She fears that one of our meetups or text calls will be the one where I say it's officially over, and she won't fight it because she deserves it. Hearing that wrecked me. I told her I haven't tossed away our relationship and that being away from home doesn't mean I have. I appreciated her efforts in taking IC seriously. I asked if she was having any mind movies or triggers. She said she has random flashes of that night with AP and triggers related to certain words he used to say to her. I joked that we're a messed up pair these days. She repeated that she's the one who did this to us, OBS, her kids, and my mom. I countered that AP did his fair share of damage, but she insisted she let him into our lives. She asked how she could support me through the mind movies and triggers. I told her I wasn't sure. After some silence, I asked if she'd be open to talking about what we're each experiencing, like being there for each other as friends, the foundation of our relationship. We could talk about it in IC and with each other. She said she wants to help me but doesn't know if it's possible or fair for me to support her through the consequences of the affair. Knowing she had her IC session coming up, I started to end the call. But first, I brought my mom's dog on, and it impacted my WW. She waved and called out to him, and he recognized her, staring at the screen and wagging his tail. We shared that moment. Before hanging up, she thanked me for confiding in her, and I thanked her for being there and opening up. She said I could call her any time, and she would do her best to help me combat the mind movies. I cried some more right after the call. I tried to resume work but felt sluggish. When my mom came home, I helped with the groceries, unable to fake it. I think she knew I had an episode. She gave me some comforting words. I feel conflicted. On one hand, it felt nice to open up to my WW again, but it also felt wrong, like a part of me was shouting, "Why are you doing this? You need to run and protect yourself." These two sides seem impossible to reconcile. One of the biggest betrayal hurdles for me is that she had deep, intimate talks with AP. It feels like another violation, something we owed to each other that she gave to AP even before the work trip. If I'm going to be open with her about my experiences, I need her to be open with me too. It needs to be mutual, not her holding back. I've struggled to figure out how to encourage her to be open without pushing too hard. Before D-Day, we had an open line of communication. Now I'm unsure how much to push and when to pull back. She said the EA started because she didn't want to burden me with her problems while I was going through my own issues. But isn't it worse now if she continues to keep things from me? Isn't that partly how we ended up here? One thing I'm certain about is that I need to be more proactive regarding this situation. I need to have the necessary conversations with my WW and still have questions I want answers to. I don't know if I'm going about this the right way or if there even is a right way to handle this, but I feel like I need to try.